Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the first day of the Virtual Career Expo. So to round off the first day, we are going to have a very special workshop in store for all of you. Are you feeling demotivated? Are you feeling stressed? Fret not, for this workshop, you'll have the answers you need. Joining us is Karl. He is an international speaker and consultant that has conducted over 1,000 workshops, and more than 50,000 professionals throughout the world has attended his courses. So let me hand it over to Karl right now.
Welcome, and thank you, Wilson, for the introduction, and welcome everybody to the webinar, How to Manage Stress During COVID-19. So let's go ahead and start the slides if we could, please. And we'll get everything going. Very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing more stress than ever before, at least in my lifetime. The World Health Organization, as a matter of fact, considers stress an epidemic even before COVID-19. In fact, they list stress as the second leading cause of disability worldwide, costing the world economy over 250 billion US dollars in lost productivity. And again, this was before the COVID-19. The number one disability in the world today is depression. And as many of you might know, there is definitely a relationship between stress and depression. So we want to talk a little bit about both of them today. But let's talk first a little bit about the pandemic and how that's adding to the stress that we're already experiencing. Dr. Tedros, the Director General of the World Health Organization, says the impact of the pandemic on people's mental health is already extremely concerning. Social isolation, fear of contagion, and loss of family members is compounded by the distress caused by loss of income and often employment. So what we have is a stress epidemic now compounded by a COVID-19 pandemic, and the effects can be truly devastating for people who are experiencing this social isolation. We're not designed as human beings to be isolated from each other, and yet this is what we're called to do in light of this pandemic. Fear of contagion, loss of family members, and of course, all of the distress caused by loss of income and often employment. So it's a huge amount of stress that we're experiencing today, unlike anything I've ever experienced in my lifetime. So what exactly is stress? There's so many definitions. You can ask 10 people and get 10 different definitions. So I want to give you a scientific definition that was developed a few years ago by Dr. Lazarus, who is a lecturer at Berkeley University. And he says stress is a particular relationship between the person and the environment that the person considers to be taxing or exceeding his or her resources and putting his or her well-being at risk. So stress is a relationship. It's a relationship between what's going on out here in my environment and what's going on with me inside my internal resources. When what's going on out here is more taxing than my resources can handle, then my well-being is at risk, and that is what stress is. The relationship between what's going on in the environment that is taxing or exceeding my internal resources. Now, there's several stages of distress, because when stress reaches a certain stage, and particularly when stress is chronic and ongoing, it will reach a certain stage, and there are basically 3 stages to distress. The first one is characterized by anxiety, nervous, and restlessness. So this is sort of the physical symptoms of stress, this feeling of anxiety and nervous and feeling restless all the time. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. Along with that, sleep and appetite changes. For many of us, that means sleeping too little and eating too much. Many people who are experiencing stress, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this, is this difficulty getting to sleep, too much on your mind. You can't let things go. All the questions that are constantly going on and over again in your mind. And then appetite, we tend to overeat when we're stressed. And this can also develop into what's called a mental fog. When we get anxious, when we lose sleep, we're not as sharp mentally. We sort of have this fog. It's hard for us to have a feeling of clarity or to think clearly at times. And finally, the last symptom of this stage of distress is feeling unsure about yourself. We start losing a sense of confidence. We start wondering, why can't I get work? Why is things so hard all the time? Is there something wrong with me? And this begins to happen in this very first stage of distress. The second stage can result in anger and frustration. We get short-tempered, easily frustrated. Little things set us off the way they didn't used to. And we can also experience what I call restless fatigue. And this is when you're both anxious and restless and have a hard time sitting down and relaxed, but you're also tired and exhausted. And so it's a combination of the anxiety and the exhaustion together in this sort of restless fatigue. Next, we can experience decreased memory, focus, and concentration. So what happens when we get more and more stressed, our brains, our prefrontal cortex, our thinking mind doesn't work quite as well. We begin to experience problems with our memory, our focus, and even our concentration. And the last symptom of this stage of stress is we're beginning to lose our self-confidence. We're wondering, is all of this because there's something wrong with me? Am I not up to the challenge? Is there something that I ought to be doing better? Is there maybe something not right with me? We start losing our self-confidence. The third stage, and this is one that I'd like you to pay attention to, because if you're experiencing some of these signs, you need to get some help, because this is a stage where it's beyond something that friends can help us with. We need to have a more formal kind of help. And that's when the stress begins to turn into depression. And I say this because I've experienced depression. I know what it feels like, and I know how difficult it is to deal with. Because at this stage of distress, there's a sense of desperation. I feel really terrible and awful and desperate inside myself. I feel like things have really gone wrong. And on top of that, there is a feeling of what's called hopeless and helpless. I feel hopeless. Nothing will ever change, and I'm helpless to do anything about it. And these symptoms are especially prevalent in depression. You can also feel exhausted and withdrawn. Absolutely no energy at all. I can barely get out of bed. I don't want to do anything. All I want to do is withdraw, just watch TV or be alone in a dark room. And along with that, we can get this obsessive negative thinking where the thoughts are going around and around in our heads, and they're very negative. I'm no good. Nothing's good. Everything's bad. There's something wrong with me. I am flawed. And that can actually lead into depression and suicidal thoughts. So if you know somebody or if you yourself have reached this stage, my encouragement to you is to get some help with it, because this is something that you can't just pull yourself out of by yourself. It requires professional and real help. So those are the stages of distress. I want to talk now a little bit about what's called mindfulness-based stress reduction, because this next section, I'm going to explain some methods, and we're actually going to try them out. I'm going to encourage you to do a couple of these stress relief methods with me as you're watching me on your computers. So mindfulness-based stress reduction is the most researched and utilized form of stress management in the world today. It was actually developed by Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn, who actually did his PhD in in molecular biology at MIT. And he got very interested in this kind of stress management and has been teaching it to doctors and hospitals all across the United States. So let's have a look at the first part of this. And the very first part of MBSR is what's called somatic awareness. And what that really means is being aware of what's going on inside of you. Now, the web address here, this is a video that's on my YouTube channel. It's worth taking this address down, because if I'm going to show you the technique, but if you forget how to do it, you can always go to my YouTube channel and download the video, and it will remind you of how to do this next exercise. So what we want to begin to do now is to become more aware of our feelings and sensations and emotions as they are occurring. You see, what happens is when we get very stressed, we get very busy in our minds. We have all of those repeating thoughts. We get caught up literally in our heads, and we're not paying attention to what's going on inside of us, in our bodies. And the thing about stress is it happens in your body. Stress is a feeling, it's a sensation, an emotion, and these occur in the body first. And when we're so busy inside of our minds, we're not paying attention to what's going on inside the body. So you can become stressed and have a body sensation of stress and literally not pay any attention to it. And that's how stress builds up over and over and over during time. In fact, it's estimated that we go into a stress reaction 60 times a day. That's 60 times a day. But we're not aware of it because we're so busy in our minds, we're not paying attention to what's going on in our bodies. And we need to learn to pay attention to what our bodies are trying to tell us. So this first This is, by the way, the same link, so don't need to worry about that. This first exercise is about how to bring your attention, your awareness out of your head and into your body so that you can begin to become more aware of when your body is going into a stress reaction. So what I'd like you to do, if you would please, is to imagine you're having a really stressful day. Now, I know that shouldn't be too hard to do. Imagine you're having a really stressful day. Bring that day sort of back into your mind. So recall and remember what was going on during that day, what made it stressful, and allow yourself to feel the feelings of that stress. Just let your body, yourself, feel those sensations and those feelings. And what we're going to utilize is what's called the felt sense. Your felt sense is your intuitive ability to sense and feel what you're experiencing. It's not an intellectual thing, it's an intuitive sensing and feeling capacity we all have, but just don't use. So I'm going to ask you to bring your attention from your head into your body, and I'll guide you through this. And allow yourself to sense and feel with your intuition whatever it is your body is trying to tell you. Because I can assure you, your body's trying to give you information all of the time. It's just that we've forgotten how to listen. So now we're going to learn how to listen to what's going on inside of us. So if you want, you can close your eyes and just listen to me. Or you can continue to watch. I find it easier to close my eyes. It helps me concentrate. And what I want you to do is to extend your attention, extend your awareness from your head into your neck. These muscles that connect your neck and your shoulders, these are called the trapezius muscles, and your shoulders. Okay, imagine you're having the stressful day, and just extend your attention into your neck and your shoulders. And just allow yourself to feel whatever it is you're experiencing. Very often when we're stressed, we tend to tighten these muscles and they can get very stiff and sore. And there's maybe even a sense of tightness, sometimes even a sense of tingling. Whatever you're experiencing in your neck and shoulders, just allow yourself to become aware of it. Just extend your awareness into your neck and shoulders. And just let yourself feel whatever your body is trying to tell you. Just listen to your body. Now continue to bring that awareness into your chest, particularly the area around your heart. This is another area that we tend to bring a lot of stress. And we can often feel that as a sense of tension or tightness. And sometimes it happens right around the heart. In fact, about 75% of the patients who go to the emergency room thinking they're having a heart attack are actually having a stress attack, an anxiety attack, because we tend to tense these muscles and it can get very sore around our chest and our heart area. So just pay attention. What are you sensing and feeling in your chest and your heart? We often use words like, I have a heavy heart, or my heart is broken. And that's because we feel emotions deeply in our heart area. So what's your heart telling you? Just allow yourself to pay attention. Now extend your awareness into your stomach. This is the third place that we tend to hold a lot of stress and emotion. Just pay attention to what's going on into your stomach. Is there tension, tightness, maybe an acid kind of feeling? we very often have an unsettled stomach when we're feeling tense. In fact, colitis is very associated with chronic stress. And also notice that we're often holding our stomachs in. We're literally tensing and tightening our stomachs and holding them in. And I'll talk about that in just a moment, as it really can restrict our breathing as well. So again, what's going on in your neck and shoulders? What are you feeling there? What are you sensing in your chest and your heart? And what are you feeling in your stomach? These are the three main areas you want to pay attention to, because stress will happen here first, and then later your mind will recognize it. But take time out during the day to pay attention to what your body is trying to tell you. Now we're going to talk about how to discharge the energy residue of stress. Now here's another web address that you can go to. Again, this is on my YouTube channel, and this has the discharging exercise. I'll show you here and we'll practice it together. But in case you forget or want to learn from a video, you can go to that YouTube channel. So what happens when we get stressed out over and over and over during the day? We build up the stress energy, because stress is a form of energy. It's a form of tight, tense energy, and the residue of that energy, of that cumulative stress, can get built up in the nervous system, and particularly in the neck and shoulders. I'm willing to bet that most of you who did the somatic awareness felt the energy, felt the tension and the tightness in your neck and shoulders, because this is where we tend to hold it. Because what we're doing unconsciously is bracing ourselves for the next bad thing to happen. And as we do that, we tense up these muscles in our neck and shoulder. So this is where we tend to have most of this tension and tightness. It's called energy residue. It's literally residue of stress that has taken root right in the neck and shoulders. So the next exercise, I'm going to show you how to release and discharge this energy residue. So this is the same web address, by the way. So what I want us to do now is, what we're going to do is we're going to take a big, deep breath from your diaphragm, because when we get stressed, we tend to hold our breath, and we're going to pull our shoulders up. Well, actually, I'm going to pull them forward. Can you see that? They're forward, so I'm pulling them forward. And as I continue to breathe in, I'm going to pull them up to my ears as far as I can go. I'm going to rotate my shoulders back with the big, deep breath, and then I'm going to push out all of my breath, release all of my stress. So you want to visualize that as you're doing this, you can sense and feel all of the stress, the hardened stress in your neck and shoulders, begin to break down into pieces as you're moving. So you want to use your visualization, you want to use deep breathing, and this is actually called mindful movement. So let's try a couple of these together. Again, breathe in deeply from the diaphragm, pull your shoulders forward, up, up, up to your ears as far as you can go, rotate it back, and then release, release, discharge, let out all of the stress, and push your breath all the way out. We tend to hold our breath in our stomach. We want to push it all the way out. Again, breathe in deeply, up, pull your shoulders forward, up towards your ears as far as you can go, rotate them back, and then push it all the way out. Imagine all of that stress coming out. Now you should be doing this, and I'm sure you can feel a little bit of the release already of that hardened energy. See, we should be practicing this whenever you have a chance. Because again, as I said, we go into a stress reaction 60 times a day. we need to learn to start releasing some of that energy. Now, I want to show you one other way of doing this, and this is using what's called dynamic tension. So dynamic tension is moving tension, and it's part of a system called progressive relaxation that a doctor developed many years ago. And what he found is that certain of his patients, even though they did the movement like we just did, they couldn't discharge and release the stress because it had been so embedded, so buried, so deeply into these muscles. And this is what happens when we're stressed enough and we get stressed over and over and over again. That tension literally gets buried into or embedded into our neck and shoulders. So it takes a little bit more to sort of dig it out. And that's what we're going to do next. And again, that's what this this YouTube video is about. So here's what we want to do this time. This time we want to tense the muscle before we move it. So tense the muscles, tense your muscles up just as tense as you can, as much tension as you can imagine. Now slowly pull them up or pull them forward. As much tension, pull them up as far as you can go. Rotate them all the way back, and now release and push all of your breath out. Empty it all out. Let's try it again. Tense the shoulders up, really tense them up, pull them forward, forward, up, up, rotate them back, and then push it out, release, and let all of the stress come out. So I'm pretty certain you could begin to feel the stress break down in your neck and shoulders, because this is what dynamic tension does, or progressive relaxation does. It tenses the muscle, moves it, unlocks and releases and discharges that energy residue, and then you can really begin to relax. So again, this shoulder rotation, it's very simple, very easy, takes very little time to do. You can do it anywhere. The best time to do this is when you're in the car, you're in traffic, you may be at a light, you might be tense. Practice it then. Practice it during your break. Practice it whenever you can, whenever you're beginning to feel that tension build up. Start releasing and discharging that energy residue, because you don't want it to build up in your nervous system. Because what really does the damage is the accumulation of the stress energy in the nervous system. And once you begin to discharge it, you're training yourself to let go of that energy residue. So we want to get into a habit of recognizing it and then discharging it. So the next technique I want to share with you is called natural breathing. Most of us, most of the time, breathe unnaturally. We breathe short, shallow breaths. If you've ever watched a young child breathe, you'll notice that their stomachs or their diaphragms, that lower diaphragm, their stomachs expand out with each breath. You can literally see the stomach come out with each breath. That's natural breathing. That's the way we're designed to breathe, fully and deeply from our diaphragm, from our stomachs. But we don't do that because we've gotten so used to holding everything in. And what we're literally doing by holding our stomachs in is holding the stress in. And so natural breathing is allowing yourself to breathe deeply and fully from the diaphragm. The other thing is this: oxygen, or the air that you breathe in, is oxygen. Oxygen is energy. The way in which you feed your mind and your body energy is with oxygen. As a matter of fact, your brain, even though it's less than 2% of your body's weight, consumes more than 20% of your body's oxygen. So if you're not breathing fully and deeply, if you're not breathing naturally, the oxygen cannot get into your bloodstream. Because when you breathe in, the oxygen goes into your lungs and from your lungs into your arteries. But if you're breathing short, shallow breaths, you've got more carbon dioxide than you do oxygen. And there's not a chance for that oxygen to go from your lungs into your arteries through the capillaries and then into your bloodstream where it gives you energy. So what we want to do is to learn how to breathe deeper and fuller. Now, I learned this when I studied Qigong. I studied Qigong about 30 years ago. I had severe depression, and I began to study Qigong. And my Qigong teacher, my Sifu, would always tell me that I was breathing much too shallow and much too rapidly. He said, Qigong breath is long, slow, deep, even, fine, and tranquil. Those are the qualities of Qigong breath or natural breath. Long, slow, deep, even, fine, and tranquil. So we need to practice, literally practice breathing correctly. So what I'd like you to do, if you would, I'm going to go ahead and put the camera here so that you can see. I want you to put your left hand on your stomach, right here on your stomach. And what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in so that our stomachs expand with the breath. And I want you to breathe into about a count of 6. So take a long, deep breath from your diaphragm. But first, let's discharge the air that's already in there. So push the air out. Now breathe in. Can you see my hand expand as I'm breathing in? Allow the oxygen, hold your breath for just a second, let the oxygen go into your bloodstream, and now release slowly. 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's go to 8, 7, 8. Again, discharge all of the air out. Now breathe in. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Push all the air out. Breathe in deeply. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now on your own. Focus on the breath. Let it come in and out fully, deeply, and naturally. Allow yourself to breathe fully. Relax your stomach. Let the tension and the stress out of your stomach as you breathe. My suggestion is that you practice that kind of breathing after you do the shoulder rotation and allow yourself to recharge, because what you did with this was discharge, and now you want to recharge with new energy. The fastest, most direct way to get new energy into your system is by how you breathe. So learn to breathe deeply, fully, and naturally. And it's simply going to take practice because we're so used to breathing short and shallow, again, which robs us of the oxygen that we need. Now, there's another part to discharging stress that I want to talk about, and I'm not going to be able to show you the movement today, but again, here is the YouTube address where I have a video, that shows you the power of what I call flow motion. And what it is mindful movement. There's a big difference between mindful movement and exercise. So many people say, oh, I don't want to exercise, I don't like it, it doesn't feel good, I don't have the time, and so forth. Mindful movement is completely different. It's not the same thing as going out and lifting weights or running 5 miles. Mindful movement is enjoying the exercise for the pleasure of the movement. Mindful movement is having your whole attention invested in the movement itself. And what I learned was Qigong, as I mentioned, when I was in Singapore. And just to give you a little idea, I had burned out of the emergency room. I used to work as a psychologist in an emergency room. I burned out, developed severe depression, was on lots of medication. In fact, my doctor told me I'd have to be on medicine the rest of my life because of how severe my depression was. And I met this Qigong master when I lived in Singapore 30 years ago. And he took one look at me and he said, your energy is very bad. Come with me, we'll do Qigong. And after 6 months of Qigong, I threw my Prozac, my antidepressant medication, away and have not taken it now in over 30 years. Because there is power and energy in learning how to move mindfully and fully. And again, if you take a look at the video that I have for you, you can follow along. It's a video that teaches you how to do very simple, easy movements that will bring energy into your system and discharge all of the old energy. Whether it's Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga or mindful walking is a wonderful mindful movement. Any kind of exercise in which you're doing the exercise for the pleasure, for the enjoyment of the exercise, in which you can feel the energy moving through your body to where you can begin to absorb and internalize this positive energy, because that's what you begin to feel as you start practicing some of these methods. If you can learn one of those movements and just do a little bit of it a day, it will make a huge difference in your stress level. In fact, you'll go from being stressed to being empowered, because these motions will help empower you with positive energy. So I highly recommend that you begin to find a way to work a little bit of mindful movement into your day. In my opinion now, it's crucial. I practice every day, and it's really the backbone of my being able to stay positive even in such a stressful time as we're experiencing today. So find that works for you and practice the power of mindful movement. Now I want to discuss a form of what I call regaining control, because very often what happens to us is when we get stressed, and particularly if we're not noticing it, that stress can build up and build up and build up, and all of a sudden we find ourselves at our wits' end, and we can say something or do something that we wished we really hadn't done. I think you know what I mean. It's when the stress gets so bad that you can lash out at somebody verbally or break something or really act out that that can be harmful to yourself and difficult for those around us. And what happens is stress becomes a habit. It literally becomes a habit, because when we get stressed out and we act out that stress, we're literally firing off certain neural pathways in our brain. And the more we fire them off, the easier it is to do. So the more we get stressed, the more we act out on stress, the easier it becomes. And so we must learn a way to regain a sense of control and to not allow that stress pattern, that stress habit to come out over and over and over again. Because the more we do it, the easier it gets, the more we do it. And we find ourselves losing a sense of control. So here's kind of a menu of things to begin to do. When you first begin to notice the stress, when you begin to notice it in your neck, in your shoulders, or in your body somehow, or you're beginning to have those stressful thoughts, rather than act it out, take a moment and pause. And this is probably the hardest thing to do, because what we want to do at that time is yell or scream at somebody, and we're just on the edge of doing it. Learn to take a second to pause and breathe. And if you can, rotate the shoulders, discharge and release the stress and relax. Because the more stressed we get, the more there's a part of our brain called the amygdala. In fact, Daniel Goleman talked about this in his best-selling book, Emotional Intelligence. He says when we get too stressed, we go into what's called an emotional hijacking. And that means our emotions literally hijack our brain. And so we have this part of, it's called the lower brain, it's called the amygdala. And when that gets overly activated, that's what causes us to act out. And it literally turns off or turns down the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain. So what we want to begin to do is to switch back on the thinking brain and pause and breathe and relax rather than react. Then we're in a position where we can reflect on what we want to do and then respond. So rather than react, we want to reflect and respond. But we can't do that until we notice the stress, we pause for a moment, breathe, relax, reflect, and respond. Every time you can practice this, every time you can do this, you're literally breaking that stress cycle that's taken root in your mind. So rather than the automatic stress reaction, pause, breathe, relax, reflect, and respond. Now, the last method is what's called self-compassion. And this is one of the most important things that we can learn to do. Because what happens when we get stressed and we start getting frustrated and angry is that we can start putting ourselves down. And I think you know what I mean. If you've ever really listened to the things you say to yourself when you're very angry or upset or stressed, they can be very terrible. We can call ourselves all kinds of names. We can be very harsh and even ruthless towards ourselves. The way we treat ourselves, we would never treat another person. But yet when we get real upset and stressed out, we can be harsh on ourselves, particularly if we think we've made a mistake or we've done something stupid or wrong. That's when we can tell ourselves all kinds of names and direct terrible, awful feelings towards ourselves and make ourselves feel awful. This is possibly the worst thing that we can do to ourselves. So self-compassion is now being researched by Dr. Kirsten Neff. And it's a great website there, selfcompassion.org. You can read all of her research. You can read a number of her exercises. She has a bunch of free exercises. And she says, instead of mercilessly judging and criticizing yourself for various inadequacies or shortcomings, self-compassion means you're kind and understanding when confronted with personal failings. So this is what we need to begin to develop, a sense of kindness and understanding towards ourselves. And so if you feel that energy begin to build up, you hear that angry self-talk, that voice putting you down and being harsh towards yourself, again, release. Allow that to be discharged. Breathe fully and deeply. And then you might even practice a couple of minutes, and this is what I do. I put one hand on my stomach so I can feel my breathing, and another hand over my heart. In fact, you might give this a try right now. And I allow myself to have a sense of compassion and kindness towards myself. Rather than putting myself down and being angry and harsh with myself, I instead tell myself, it's okay. You're allowed to make a mistake. It's all right. You're not a bad person. In fact, you're a good person. You can be kind and caring and considerate for the person that you are. So I want you to think about something. Your relationship with yourself is the most important relationship you have. And the greatest amount of stress we experience is the stress we give to ourselves. It's the way in which we treat ourselves, the way in which we judge ourselves, the way in which we're harsh with ourselves. This is actually the greatest amount of stress that we experience, is what we do to ourselves. And so we need to begin to make a real practice out of being kind and forgiving and compassionate with the person that we are. Because you live with yourself 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we need to learn to feel at home inside of ourselves. So learn to practice self-compassion. So let me sort of summarize here and end with just a couple of pointers of things you might take away from the talk today. Number one, try not to personalize rejection. You are experiencing probably a great amount of rejection as you're going for job after job, applying for jobs, getting turned down. I can't tell you how many times I was rejected when I first started off as a speaker. I had to really try to understand that the rejection isn't about me personally. They're not rejecting me because there's something wrong or flawed or bad with me. They're rejecting my position. They're rejecting my application for work. It's not a rejection of me. And sometimes it's hard to separate the two because we feel rejected. My encouragement to you is to not personalize rejection if you are applying for work and not getting any, and you get turned down again and again. Monitor your negative self-talk. It often just goes sort of underneath we often just don't monitor it. We're not aware of it. It's just sort of underneath the consciousness, but it's often there. So monitor that negative self-talk, particularly in times when you're feeling highly stressed or you feel like you've been rejected. Learn to continually discharge the stress energy. We need to get into a habit of doing that over and over and over again, and learn to breathe deeply and fully after you discharge the energy. Pause, breathe, relax, reflect, and respond. Get into the habit of slowing down, thinking about what I want to do, developing more of a sense of control rather than getting into that automatic reaction of acting out or saying something that you wished you hadn't. Focus on self-compassion. Really focus on being kind and caring and appreciative of the person that you are. Keep connected with friends and family. It's too easy to get isolated. Try to keep your social connections fresh and to keep connected with them. They're sometimes a real source of strength for us. And finally, my encouragement is to take the long view. And what I mean by that is, imagine you are, say, 5 years in the future, and you're looking back and going, boy, that was a tough time, that COVID-19. Well, that was hard getting through, but I got through it. and I'm stronger and better for the person that I am today. Because there will come a time, COVID will pass. You will be in a better time when all of the stress begins to lessen a little bit. And as you begin to practice some of these methods, imagine that you can literally look back and go, wow, I'm glad I really stepped up to the challenge and learned to manage my stress. So those are the things to think about. And I wish you all the very, very best in your search for employment and for finding a meaningful and happy life. Thank you very much. So let's welcome back Wilson, and we'll go to any questions.
Thank you very much, Karl. It was a very, very enlightening session. So we seem to have quite a number of questions here. We have about 5 questions. Let me see. Okay, for the first question, we have one from Harold. He mentioned that he has been having sleepless nights and from losing his income. Are there any methods to help him sleep?
Yes, Harold, and by the way, sleep is one of the first things to go when we're stressed. And what sleep really is, or the difficulty to sleep, it's that energy residue that is built up in the nervous system. That's what's not allowing you to sleep. The stress energy has built up and it's carrying on at night. And often we have what's called unfinished business. We have things we think about over and over and over again. So what I do is I get into the habit of doing my stress relief. I discharge and release all of my stress. If I have anything that's bothering me, I write it down so that I can get it from in here onto paper. And then I tell myself, I'm letting go of this. I'm letting go of this for today. I will allow myself to have the sleep that I need. Now, if your sleep is really, really bad and you can't relax or let go of all of the thoughts, it's worthwhile to think about something like acupressure, acupuncture, massage, anything that can begin to release all of that stress that's built up in your nervous system, because that's what's keeping you from sleeping. And that, by the way, it's that stress energy that drives our thinking over and over and over again. That's the stress energy that drives it. So learn to let go of that before you go to sleep. Turn off the cell phone, turn off the television. Those are things. In fact, I don't even have my cell phone in my room. So those are a couple of other things you might try.
All right. Okay, next up we have Gavin. Gavin has no questions, but he says that he will search for your videos and wanted to thank you, and he really enjoyed the session. So he will start practicing the exercises once he watches the videos.
Excellent, thank you, and I encourage you, look up the video. They're on my YouTube channel. There's a whole bunch of them, but they're there and they will work for you if you'll do them. And the main thing, again, is to do the stress management techniques, to practice the breathing, the relaxation, and the mindful movement. It'll make a real difference.
Right. So, okay, next is from DC Tan. He mentioned that he has been having panic attacks since young, but it has been getting worse during the pandemic. How can he try to reduce it?
Okay. Yeah, panic attacks, those are really tough to deal with. I had them once and they can be very, very frightening. The thing with panic attacks is this. What drives a panic attack is the short, shallow breathing. Every therapist, I'm a psychotherapist, and every therapist that I know and that I've taught and that works with people with anxiety works on the breathing. Because when you get into a panic attack, the breath gets short and shallow. You have a real oxygen, carbon dioxide exchange that's not good. It fuels the panic. So you need to breathe long and deep breaths from the diaphragm. The moment you notice it, again, pay attention to what's going on in your body, because it's going to show up inside here somewhere before it results in the panic attack. So catch it early. You'll be holding your breath. You'll be feeling tense and tight, or you'll have some kind of tightness in your chest. The moment you start noticing that, that's the time to start practicing. Get it before it gets so bad.
Excellent advice. So, okay, the next one is from Anonymous. So, he or she was saying that since we are stuck at home, working from home, they are constantly surrounded by work and tend to work longer hours. Are there any tips for getting out of the work mode? You know, constantly being at home, surrounded by work?
Good question. Good question. And that, I'll tell you what, I've also noticed that myself. It is easy to slip into that working all of the time because you're there and it reminds you I'm here and this is work. I give myself now a specific place that I work. I give myself regular hours that I work. I give myself regular time off that I take, regular lunch break. And again, when I leave work, when I leave my room, I'm telling myself I'm leaving my work. And I shoulders, breathe it, relax it, let go of it. And I literally tell myself I am now letting go of work. And then I'll go do something else. And then when I come back to work, all right, I'm now back at work. But we need to give ourselves both permission and a mental, physical cue of some sort that says, this is work and now I'm letting go of it.
All right. And okay, last question for the night before we end the session. So Anonymous said every time he or she feels stressed, they will start exercising or cleaning. It helps with distracting their thoughts. But again, it's like a repeated cycle. The next day they are feeling stressed again, then they are doing the same exercises again. Is there a better way to handle or to cope with such stress?
I wouldn't wait to do the exercise. Again, I schedule my exercise in because when you're doing exercise to get rid of stress, you're often doing stressful kind of exercise. You've got stress in your mind and you're carrying that in your body. So you're doing sort of stress-exercise. And rather than do that, do your exercise in a time-planned way. Don't do it as a reaction or a way out of the stress. Instead, have a time to truly enjoy the exercise. But if you are going to do the exercise, pay attention to how you're doing it, because you can also do exercise in a very tight, tense, anxious way. And if that's what's going on, you're simply putting the stress right back in to where it's going to happen again. So pay attention to the exercise, schedule the exercise, and again, don't wait for the stress to get so built up. The moment you experience it, the moment you feel it, this is an exercise all by itself. So get into this kind of exercise as a way of releasing the stress, because it takes a certain kind of exercise to, now I'm letting go. Now I'm releasing. Now I'm allowing the stress to let go.
Yes. While being really stressed and also exercising, it might also lead to injury. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely, particularly
yourself.
because you're exercising in that stressful, tight way, and it's not getting rid of it. It's literally kind of, you get a temporary relief, but then that energy is back in the body.
All right. Okay, so it's time to bring the session to a close. I would like to thank Karl for really sharing his methods to get motivated to be positive during these complicated times. So thank you very much, Karl.